Hello, I'm Andrew Bethell, an estate planning attorney here in Southern California. Today I want to talk about how to actually build generational wealth. It's a topic that I discuss with many of my clients since we're talking about their estate plans day in and day out. And with that, I wanted to share some of the secrets that we've learned over time with you. Now, everything I say today isn't necessarily going to be particular to your case, but these are some general guiding principles that everyone should find helpful in one aspect or another. So without further ado, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and let's get into it. So how do you build generational wealth? Well, you could do the standard stuff. Invest your money well, bust your butt, and make sure you save some of it, maybe grow a business. But that's kind of the slow way to go about it, or at least not the fun way, not the reason you're really here. What you're looking for is a way to really create that big wealth. And oftentimes, some folks looking for a little bit of a quick hit, they're looking for that big leap. How do we make that big jump to the next step in order to take our personal wealth beyond us so that it spans through the generations of our family? Now, when I say explosion and big leap, I'm not trying to sell you some snake oil here. The point is, these are some strategies that all of us can use to help build our wealth that will span beyond us to kids and grandkids and whatnot, that maybe we won't necessarily see all the fruits of ourselves, but again, the point is to continue on beyond you. Now, these strategies are things that we can all do, and oftentimes is how most of us regular folks do actually build some wealth. All right. I know. I've been giving you this big long intro. Let's actually jump into it. So, how do you build generational wealth? Two ways. You need your assets to work for you, and you need to avoid paying capital gains taxes that eat into that wealth. So, on that first front, how do we put our assets to work for us? Well, we want to leverage those assets. Don't sell, leverage. So if you already have some real estate and you have some equity built up into it, with that, instead of selling the property, cashing out and buying a new one, well, you just pull the equity from that property and maybe put it towards a new investment opportunity. Maybe you have some money saved up in an investment portfolio and you want to use some money in order for a new business venture. Instead of selling the positions in that account and paying capital gains taxes on it, well, why not be able to borrow against that account, put that money towards the new venture, and, well, you're still paying back the investment company that lent you the funds with the growth that should hopefully be occurring in the account during that time period. Now, I know this may sound kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're borrowing money here to pay money over there. But the point is to not overextend yourself, but you're just going to utilize the assets that you already have on hand without turning around and selling them, and firstly, losing the ability to leverage them in the first place, and secondly, losing some of that wealth through taxation, capital gains taxes. On the note of capital gains taxes, I want you to never pay capital gains taxes ever again. So with that, let's first talk really quickly about what are capital gains taxes with an example. Capital gains taxes is a tax on the difference between what you bought an asset for and what you sold it for. Essentially, your profit in that case. So for example, let's say mom and dad bought a house for $300,000 and many years down the line, they turn around and sell that house for $800,000. Well, their basis in the property is that initial purchase price, $300,000. And we subtract that from their sales price, the $800,000. The difference between those two numbers is the amount that is subject to capital gains tax, in this case, $500,000. And mom and dad are going to either pay 0, 15, or 20% on that $500,000 sale of the house. Now, yes, mom and dad made some money from the sale of the house, but at that point, they're losing a bunch of that money right off the bat through taxes. So that's a situation where it's almost too expensive to sell. We don't want to sell and pay taxes on that money. We want to pull some of the equity maybe from that house, maybe pull $500,000 from the equity of the house, and then turn around and maybe buy a house for one of their kids. Well, now mom and dad have their big house that we've pulled some equity from, but also put that towards a house for the kids. Now, when the kids go and inherit their mom and dad's assets, not only are they inheriting the big house that may be worth $800,000 or more at death, they're also going to inherit that secondary property. Now they've got two properties to inherit from mom and dad. Now, yes, maybe there's a mortgage on that stuff, but we'll get back to all that in just a minute. But first, let me take a little detour. Let's say mom and dad just have to sell that house. Maybe they want to downsize. That's too much house for them. Well, coming back to our mantra of not wanting to pay capital gains taxes in the first place, what our next strategy is going to be, let's not sell, let's exchange. Now, I've done videos all in 1031 exchanges. There's a lot of details that need to be done correctly, like the timing of it all. So you can watch that video if you want to know more of all those specific details. But in essence, the idea with the 1031 exchange is we can exchange property A for property B and not pay taxes on that exchange, with the idea that the growth that has occurred, the appreciation of property A, we're not being taxed on that until we actually realize that gain. And because that asset was exchanged for another, we haven't realized the gain, therefore no capital gains taxes owed. Not until I sell property B, but going down the line, we're not going to sell property B. You can always exchange that for a new one under another 1031 exchange, or leading into our next topic, leave it for the kids to inherit. On that note, I want you to keep this phrase in mind. Never gift, bequeath. So, I want you to never give any of these highly appreciating assets to your kids during your lifetime, because in that case, you are actually doing them a disservice from a tax perspective. Only bequeath them the property, which just means leave it to them in your trust or will, ideally a trust, so that they can inherit the property. Now, those of you who may already know about stepped up tax bases are probably already getting light bulbs in their head, but in this case, for those that don't know, when somebody inherits a property, they receive what's called a step up in basis. So what that means is when I inherit a property and I turn around and sell that property, my basis is going to be the value of the property when I received it, when I inherited that property. Now, in this example, this is an example where the kids actually sell the property years later for $1 million. Of course, if the kids want to keep the gravy train rolling, so to speak, of course, they could just leverage mom and dad's property, pull all that equity out that they didn't have to pay taxes on to get in the first place, and maybe push that towards a new venture. Maybe they're going to purchase properties for other members in the family, the grandkids at that point. The point is that mom and dad, through some smart planning, keeping the property and maybe selling it at some point, not through a normal sale, but maybe through a 1031 exchange, we're able to still pass on all this years of growth and appreciation in the assets to their kids, who are then able to leverage it further, opening up more and more doors and opportunities for them and future generations. Now again, you're probably thinking, surely I can't just exchange one property for another in perpetuity under the 1031 exchange, right? Uncle Sam's going to want their money at some point. Well, yes, there are a few restrictions on how often you can do a 1031 exchange, but it's really just more of a restriction on how quickly you can do one after having just done one. Not so much a restriction on how many times you can do it or how much appreciation you can defer. So a 1031 is not avoiding capital gains taxes, we're just deferring it until the sale of that asset. It just so happens that under our planning here, instead of selling that second asset later, you just let the kids inherit it, and now all of that growth, again, not subject to any capital gains taxes. We didn't do any funny or shady business in order to get there, and the kids get to benefit from mom and dad handing down a very large and appreciating asset that they can use and leverage to build further wealth from there. And a quick little tangent, what if we wanted to kickstart that growth a little bit? Let's say I have a house and it's starting to appreciate in value a little bit, and I want to benefit from a step up in basis on the house that I already have. How would I do that? Well, the Internal Revenue Code, IRC, 1014 Section E, actually tells us what we can do in this case. Under that section, if I were to go and take that house that I have and give it to my dad and let him have the house, then he passes away and leaves the house through me as an inheritance, I will get to benefit from a step up in basis as the result of me inheriting that house back from, in this case, my father. Might sound a little bit too good to be true. There are some things we do have to keep in mind, of course. Firstly, I give the house to my dad. That may open me up to gift taxes that I would have to pay on the value of the house that I give to him. Now, on the flip side, we are not going to have to pay gift taxes because I'm going to apply that value of the house towards my lifetime gift tax exclusion, which don't worry about in the scope of today's video. We'll talk about that next time. But what that means is I give the house to my dad. I don't pay any taxes on it. Dad keeps the house. And the other condition is that dad has to live for at least 1 year and then leave the house to me. So as long as he lives for 1 year, I get to inherit the house back. I get to benefit from a full step up in basis upon his passing. And now I've got a house to where all the growth that occurred during my lifetime as well as my father's is not subject to capital gains taxes if I were to sell the property later, or like if I said, I want to leverage that, pull some equity there and keep going. Of course, I suppose there is kind of a third thing to keep in mind. Once I give the property to my dad, that's it. It's his. Can't do any funny business in order to make sure that, well, the house is still mine, but maybe dad's just living in it. No, property has to go to that other person, and they have to live for a year and then send it back to you through their will or trust. So to wrap it all together, how do we build generational wealth? There's kind of two main factors on that. Firstly, we want our assets to work for us. We want to use our assets and leverage them to be able to put that leverage towards new ventures. And secondly, we don't want to pay taxes. We want to avoid paying capital gains tax because that's an immediate extraction of wealth from the equation. So in that case, we're going to either exchange an asset for another one if we do have to sell, or two, we're going to pass that on to the next generation through either our will or trust, again, ideally a trust, so that they can benefit from a stepped up tax basis, and therefore all the gains and appreciation that occurred during my lifetime is now no longer subject to any capital gains tax. Of course, there are other methods that you can use too. Today isn't the only exclusive way we can do it. You have life insurances, special investments, building a really big business, or maybe just winning the lottery. But the point is, these are strategies that all of us can utilize in order to actually build some generational wealth and pass it on to kids and grandkids. But for now, let me know what you think. Was there anything I talked about today that's new to you? Or do you want me to go into a deep dive in anything in particular? Do you want to know how we can avoid those gift taxes if I give my dad my house, for example? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, please be sure to like and subscribe. I'm attorney Andrew Bethell, and I'll see you at our next meeting.